Welcome back to Whispers from the Phylactery. I don't say it much. I like to play Lich. That's why the name. Today, I want to talk about something that can feel intimidating in tabletop games, and that's props. So, if you've watched my other videos, you know that I don't think props need to be at the table. I think they can enhance the experience, but they're never required, and a GM shouldn't feel like they're mandatory. That being said, if you do want to do props, then these are the ones that I think really help out a table. And I'm also a LARPer, so a few of these, they work interchangeably. If they work well in a live action environment for role playing, they're also going to work at your D&D table. Sometimes they need a little bit of a tweak, but most of them, just slide them right over. Steal the idea. Steal every idea you can. It's not stealing, it's honoring. So now that that's out of the way, when people hear the word props, I'll be honest, the first thing that pops up is the elaborate terrain, the set design of Critical Role and Dimension 20, handcrafted minis, and hours of prep time. And that's great. That's great. It's great that they have production teams and they can give 7 people a full week's worth of work. English. It's great. But that's not required. So props don't have to be expensive. They don't have to be elaborate, and they definitely don't have to be used all the time. You can get a lot of emphasis out of props that are used sparingly. At their best, they're small, tangible anchors. I said small. They are physical reminders that help pull us into the fiction. I promise I can speak English. So, again, today I want to share a few different types of props. I'll probably do 5 or 6, depending on when I'm watching the time here, that are easy to use, that they're flexible, and they're surprisingly effective at adding atmosphere to your games. Not because you need them. You never need them, but because they're fun. And if we're going to do it, we might as well do it. So, prop number 1, handwritten notes and letters. This one is the simplest. Well, it's probably the simplest. And honestly, it can be one of the most powerful. A handwritten note, it adds a bit of weight to the world. You're not just explaining something that the players is going in one ear and out the other. You are handing them something that they can read and pass around. It could be a letter from an NPC. It could be the torn scrap of a journal from the villain or a thug that ambushed the party. It could be a contract for an infernal contract. I did start a campaign off, an evil campaign, where the players were all bound by contracts, well, hell contract, to work together, not oppose each other, because evil games can kind of really quick. And I handed out the contract to the players. These kind of things, there's just something about holding it physically that changes how we engage with things. Even if it's written in plain ink on regular paper, you don't have to make tea-stained or coffee-stained paper, an elaborate quill, and try to do fancy handwriting. Just regular words on regular paper. It can make it feel real in a way that just speaking it doesn't. Are there things to be said about doing the fancy script? Yes. And there are things to be said about fancy paper. I can do fancy paper. I can't do different scripts to save my life. If I'm printing it out, I'll fly it. That's one thing you can do. Print it out, stain the paper that way, and then give that to your players. Sorry, brain back. It can even just be as simple as using a different pen than you normally do. Using a rough tear along one edge, just shred it slightly, or take a lighter, very carefully burn the edge. That way you don't poof the entire thing. Or maybe a wax seal. Not everyone has wax seals. That's fair. They're not, well, I wouldn't say they're niche in our hobby. Definitely not everybody has them. I'm an outlier. I have several. And part of this is these notes and letters, you don't even have to write that much. A few lines is often more evocative in the imagination than a full page. Leave gaps and spaces. Creativity shines when our imaginations fill in gaps. Also, when players fill in gaps at the table, you might be able to steal plot hooks. Prop number 2, tokens and physical markers. This one is really about making abstract concepts visible. They could be coins, which are frequent in LARP groups. I've printed off several dozen coins for one of my local LARP groups, not personal LARP groups. They could be stones, glass beads, wood tokens, and they can represent almost anything. Favors owed, corruption, inspiration, exhaustion, rations, even time. If the party has a stack of coins and each one is a time segment, when the clock ticks forward, the GM takes one away. The pile shrinks. That can be really cool. There's something deeply satisfying about gaining or losing a physical object. It has much more weight than just ticking it off the sheet. When a player hands a token back to you, it feels different. It feels heavier and more like, oh God, we only have so many of these left. And you don't have to have intricate tokens for everything. The same tokens can mean different things in different campaigns. That one's pretty common. I have a number of metal tokens I use that are Vampire the Masquerade favor tokens, or boons. They're very fancy. I love them. I use them as inspiration. I use them as countdown timers. I use them as favors. I just think that they're pretty. So physical props like these tokens, they're a quiet way of grounding mechanics in the physical world that can really help solidify things for your players. And then prop number 3, this one veers off a little bit, and that's, camera, and that's sound. So it's not a tangible thing. You can't feel it, but you hear it, and it affects you emotionally, or it can affect the subconscious. I really like to do this if I'm doing virtual games, if I have the time, of setting a bunch of ambient background sounds. Currently, I'm using Foundry, so I can set it up where if the players walk into a specific room, they hear a sound, which last night when I was running D&D, or Dungeon World, I suppose, one of the players remarked that they were surprised when they stepped near the torch and it was crackling, or they opened a door and all of a sudden the full gust of icy wind was whistling through as they stepped out onto a parapet. You don't need a full soundtrack. Basically, is what I'm getting to. Sorry, I kind of veered off. You don't need a full soundtrack or perfect timing. A bit of ambient noise goes wonders. In fact, less is usually more. If there's too much audio, it ends up overlapping and getting jarbled. So one looped ambient track at low volume can do far more than a dramatic playlist that constantly pulls focus. Sound works best when it is allowed to fade into the background and supports the moment instead of announcing itself. I think when I'm grabbing ambient sounds, the best places I tend to look at is video game music. It is designed and formulated to enhance the experience without drawing your attention away from what's going on. And I find that really useful. So video game soundtrack OSTs are fantastic if you can get them, or YouTube. YouTube has a whole bunch of ambient music for a whole bunch of different games. You can just type it in. And I mean, if the thought of doing all this music and the sound effects stresses you out, you don't have to use it. Your voice works just as well as a prop. Either a pause in the story. That was a good example. I don't know why I did that. A whisper, a slower cadence. If the Grand Magus is talking feverishly, have you recovered the scroll? What about the cult? Are they closer to summoning the demon Balthazar? Did you recover the scroll? Please tell me they don't have it anymore. Sometimes the silence helps more than the whole soundtrack. That was a bad example, but it's an example I came up with the top of my head. So, sound, it can be really beneficial. Number 4, maps that specifically invite interaction. Having full detailed maps, a lot of them are gorgeous. And I draw fantasy maps myself. But maps don't need to be precise to be powerful. If we're looking at just doing the stat props and elements to our game, simple maps go a long way. Either a rough sketch, a half-burnt fragment of a map missing pieces where they're just left unspecified. What matters is that this type of map invites questions. What's this symbol here? Why does this area look scratched out? What are they trying to hide? Who added this note in the margin? If you're adding verisimilitude with, I forget the name. There is a specific word for a map that is in universe. When a map is incomplete, feels incomplete, or subjective because it's an unreliable narrator, most maps are. Most fantasy worlds don't have GPS. All maps are unreliable to a certain degree. It becomes a story tool rather than a navigation aid. It's important that players don't treat a map as fact and start treating it as a clue. The map of the Dwarven Stronghold might have secret notes on it etched in there. It's probably, if it's been a long time, also slightly inaccurate. Yeah, I like maps. I'm not sure I really have too much more to say on maps. I like them. They're a great touch. They allow players to plot their journey, and you can even ask the players how do they want to conduct their journey. Here's the map you need to get from city A to city B, or location B, I suppose, if it's a dungeon or ruins, what have you. How do you want to get there? I really like maps. I like drawing maps. The next prop, looking at the time, the last prop, is a simple recurring object. This one's definitely subtle. You might just set it up on the table, not announce anything about it during certain times. It can just be an object used again and again, whether that is wearing a signet ring if you are speaking as a character and you slip it on before you talk, a broken medallion that you leave sitting on the table beside your screen, or a specific candle, a stamped coin that is very important. If we're using currency or like favor coins, this coin keeps showing up. It's a symbol of a faction, maybe an assassin's guild that has done a service for someone, or that you could use to pay for a service. So when this keeps showing up in various characters, how do they all have connections to this assassin's guild? Things like that. Every time the prop appears, it carries more meaning to it. What the players thought might have just been an item originally becomes a symbol of a faction or a threat or a promise. The element of recurrence, it just builds continuity. I was going to say continuity. It helps the world feel cohesive. And really, it rewards attentive players without ever really demanding its own attention. If someone asks, like, man, every time we talk to that guy, the GM wears a ring, or every time we visit this place, there's a candle on the table. What's with that? So further down the campaign, when the players recognize an object and they immediately understand what that object's for, then you've done great. You have added that element to your world building. Looking at it in the end, props don't make a game good. I've said that before and I'll say it again. Props are not what makes and breaks your game. If the story is lackluster, if there's no party dynamic, props are just fancy dressing. What's important is the people you're playing with, the stories that you're telling together, listening to the GM when they talk. Props can support these things, but they can't override them. You can give weight to moments. You can provide physical things to grip onto, tangibility, but they won't make the game by themselves. I suppose I've said that more than once now, so I'm going to move on. Props should be used when they feel fun. They shouldn't feel like work. And the best props are always the ones that serve your tables, not the ones that impress the internet. Because the internet's a fickle, fickle bastard. Let's be honest. But in the end, thank you for spending time with me today. If you made it this far, huzzah! I appreciate you. Do me a favor, like, subscribe, comment what your favorite props are in the comments below. I want to hear about it because I like to steal from my own game. Not gonna hide that. I like to steal things. It's good to steal ideas from each other. So, until next time, adventurers, good luck.